Hi, I am Hercule Poirot, and welcome to my new mystery case.
Bathed in a picturesque serenity. It was the sort of winter evening that artists longed to capture and poets wished to immortalize. Yet beneath this tranquil veneer, within the luxurious interior of Harrington Hall, a far darker tableau awaited discovery. Harrington Hall, an imposing Georgian mansion tucked discreetly behind private gates in Kensington, belonged to Lady Eugenia Harrington, a woman of formidable inheritance, formidable opinions, and, for those who moved in the upper circles of London society, formidable influence. Each December, she hosted what had come to be regarded as the social apex of the season. The Harrington Christmas Gala, an elaborate fete combining classical music, French wines, and an ostentatious display of her personal collection of antique Christmas ornaments from across Europe. It was said, half jokingly, half with sincere envy, that Lady Eugenia's baubles were insured for more money than some of the attending aristocrats' estates. On this evening, the great hall glowed with gold and carmine banners, the chandeliers casting warm reflections across crystal glasses and polished silver. A string quartet played from the balcony. Laughter drifted elegantly beneath them, and at the center of the room, as though presiding over the festivities, stood the Harrington Christmas tree, a towering Norwegian spruce laden with ornaments, Venetian glass angels, Bavarian tin soldiers, Russian lacquer-painted spheres, French gilt stars, and, most prized of all, an elaborate Fabergé snowflake designed in 1898 for a minor cousin of Tsar Nicholas II. Tonight, however, it was not the snowflake that captured attention. It was the scream. A raw, piercing scream that silenced the strings, halted conversations mid-sentence, and sent a dozen champagne flutes shattering against the marble floor. Guests turned as one toward the staircase, where Alexandra Harrington, Lady Eugenia's niece, staggered into view, her hand clamped to her mouth, eyes wide with the unmistakable terror of someone who has seen something they ought never to have seen. "Help, please, someone, quickly!" Lady Eugenia pushed forward, irritation at the interruption giving way to alarm. "Alexandra, what on earth is the matter?" It's Uncle Bernard," Alexandra gasped. He's in the ornament room. Something terrible has happened." A flurry of movement followed. Men abandoning their drinks, women gathering their skirts, servants attempting vainly to maintain decorum as guests surged down the east corridor. The ornament room, where Lady Eugenia stored the rarest pieces of her collection, stood at the far end, a private gallery accessible only by key. Yet its door now hung ajar. As guests gathered in the doorway, their breath froze. Sir Bernard Whitcomb, longtime friend of Lady Eugenia and a respected antiquities scholar, lay sprawled on the floor, his arms bent unnaturally beneath him. His face was contorted in an expression of shock, perhaps even disbelief. More disturbing still was the silver wire looped tightly around his throat, cutting so deeply into the skin that it gleamed crimson in the lamplight. To the left of the body, half hidden beneath a toppled display case, lay a shattered ornament, a delicate glass sphere painted with midnight blue enamel and tiny gold stars. A fragment of it glinted beside Sir Bernard's outstretched hand. Lady Eugenia's voice quavered for the first time in years. "My God, Bernard." A murmur rippled through the doorway. Some guests whispering prayers, others already conjecturing motives. Still others stepping closer for a better view until a firm voice commanded, "Stand back, all of you. Do not disturb anything." Chief Inspector Armand Carlyle of Scotland Yard had been an invited guest, less for his charm than for Lady Eugenia's strategic interest in cultivating influential acquaintances. Now he took charge with professional swiftness, kneeling beside the body with a practiced eye. "Strangled with this wire," he muttered, touching it lightly. "Thin but strong, almost like the hanging loops for ornaments." Alexandra, pale and trembling, pressed her back against the wall. "He was in here alone," she whispered. "I came looking for him to ask about the snowflake's provenance, and when I opened the door—" She broke off, unable to continue. Inspector Carlyle rose. "Everyone who was near this corridor in the last hour will remain available for questioning. Lady Eugenia, I'll need to—" He stopped. A woman in emerald silk had fainted onto a chair. A man near the fireplace was sobbing uncontrollably. Others whispered of heart attacks, robbery, jealousy, long-held grudges. Carlyle looked out at the sea of anxious faces and knew precisely what kind of night awaited him. And then Lady Eugenia spoke again, this time with a tremor of something unexpected. "Hope. Chief Inspector, Hercule Poirot will be arriving any moment." The room's tension shifted. Several guests straightened. A few exchanged skeptical looks. "Poirot," Carlyle muttered. "Good Lord, why?" "He dined with me earlier this week," Lady Eugenia replied, "and I extended an invitation to tonight's gala out of courtesy. He accepted, and given the circumstances—" She gestured helplessly toward the body. As if summoned by the very invocation of his name, a measured tapping sounded from the corridor, the unmistakable rhythm of precisely placed footsteps. Moments later, Hercule Poirot, immaculate in evening attire, stepped through the doorway. His mustaches were perfectly waxed, his bow tie centered to exact symmetry, his patent leather shoes gleaming as though buffed moments earlier. Only his eyes betrayed any urgency, a keen, alert brightness that swept the room in a single glance. "My dear Lady Eugenia," he said quietly, "I fear I arrive at an hour most inopportune. Poirot, thank heavens, a dreadful thing has happened." "Yes," Poirot said, stepping delicately through the doorway to observe the scene. "I see." He took in the toppled display case, the fragment of glass, the silver wire, the unnatural angle of Sir Bernard's limbs. Inspector Carlyle joined him. Murder, by the look of it. Clean strangulation with some kind of ornament wire. Quite brutal. Poirot bowed his head slightly. "Brutality often masks careful intention, mon cher. We must not be deceived." Carlyle bristled. "We will secure the room and interview every guest immediately." "And that is correct," Poirot said warmly. "But permit me a word of caution in a case such as this. The murderer is very likely among us. Calm, composed, perhaps even curious to see how the great Hercule Poirot will proceed." Several guests shifted uneasily. Poirot's gaze drifted toward the Christmas tree visible from the corridor. Its ornaments shimmered in the light, dancing like jewels. "One does not kill with such an object," he murmured, "unless the symbolism matters." He stepped beside Sir Bernard's body, looking not at the corpse but at the shattered blue ornament. "Lady Eugenia," he asked softly, "this ornament, what was its significance?" For the first time, Lady Eugenia hesitated. "That piece belonged to Bernard himself. He brought it tonight as a gift. It is very old and very dangerous," Poirot finished. He straightened, eyes gleaming with the sharpness of a blade. "Mes amis, attend closely. This is no ordinary murder. It is a message, one written in tinsel, glass, and symbolism. And I assure you, Hercule Poirot shall read it." The room fell utterly silent. The Christmas ornament murders had begun. The murmurs in the ornament room had grown into a suffocating cloud of fear and speculation by the time Poirot rose from his quiet study of the shattered blue sphere. Alexandra Harrington had been escorted to a chair, where she sat trembling, fingers intertwined so tightly her knuckles had blanched. Lady Eugenia hovered nearby, torn between managing her distressed guests and maintaining a veneer of aristocratic composure. Poirot observed all this with the calm detachment of a surgeon preparing for an intricate operation. He stepped forward, his voice carrying not with force, but with clarity. "If I may, Lady Eugenia. "It would be most helpful to gather those closest to the late Sir Bernard, those who interacted with him tonight. In matters such as these, the first impressions of character are most revealing." Lady Eugenia nodded gravely. Yes, of course. There were only a handful who spent any length of time with him this evening." She motioned to a butler, who went at once to summon the individuals she named. As the group began assembling near the tall windows, Poirot took a moment to examine the guests' faces, how swiftly their expressions shifted when they believed themselves unobserved. Some wore shock that struck him as genuine, others appeared unsettled for reasons far more complicated than the discovery of a body. Inspector Carlyle positioned himself beside Poirot with an air of forced cooperation. "You intend to conduct interviews already?" he asked. "But the evidence—" "Inspector," Poirot said gently, "when a man is murdered in such a manner, the psychology is the evidence. Let us first take the measure of hearts and minds, yes?" Carlyle sighed, but offered no objection. The first to step forward was Alexandra Harrington, still visibly shaken. I can answer whatever you need," she murmured. Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, you said you came to find Sir Bernard. Why at that moment?" "He disappeared not long after the gala began," Alexandra replied, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. "He often wandered off at these events, but tonight he seemed preoccupied." "Preoccupied in what sense?" "Distracted. Nervous, perhaps. He kept checking the time." Poirot stored this away. "And what of the ornament he brought? The blue sphere?" Alexandra hesitated. "I only know it was part of his private collection. He said he wanted Aunt Eugenia to see it, that it held personal significance." Poirot detected the subtle flicker of discomfort in her eyes. She knew more, but fear clamped the truth behind her lips. "Merci, mademoiselle. One last question. When you entered the room, was anything else disturbed?" "Only the display case," she whispered. "And the window. It was slightly open, but that could have been nothing." Carlyle perked up. "An escape route?" Poirot shook his head slightly. "A murderer who opens a window yet leaves through the door." "No, Inspector. Let us continue." Next approached Lord Adrian Pierce, a polished man in his early 40s whose impeccable suit and carefully styled hair suggested a devotion to image bordering on vanity. He offered Poirot a tight smile. Terrible business, this. Bernard was a good fellow, somewhat tedious but harmless. Poirot examined Lord Adrian's assessing gaze. "Monsieur, did you speak with Sir Bernard this evening?" "Briefly. He was telling me about some artifact he'd been researching, something to do with Eastern Europe, I believe. I confess I wasn't listening closely. I found the man's academic interests rather dull." Poirot regarded the man's cufflinks, tiny silver harps. "And you, monsieur, did you find him preoccupied, as Mademoiselle Alexandra did?" A flicker of annoyance crossed Adrian's face. "He seemed his usual self to me." Yet Poirot noted the slight tremor in the man's left hand. "Very good. You may rejoin the others." Then came Vivienne Ashcombe, a striking woman whose sharp features were softened only by the elegant fur wrap draped around her shoulders. Her voice was cool, measured. "I imagine you will ask what my connection to Bernard was. The answer is professional only. We worked together years ago on a charity board." "And you spoke to him tonight?" "Yes," she said after a brief pause. "He approached me. He wanted to discuss an old matter. I told him this evening was neither the time nor the place." Poirot studied her expression. Beneath the composed exterior lay tension coiled tight. What was the nature of this old matter? Vivienne released a slow breath. A financial discrepancy in the charity's accounts from years ago. Long resolved. Bernard always was overly fussy. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Resolved, yet he wished to speak of it again. She stiffened slightly. "You will not imply anything improper, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot merely bowed. "I imply nothing, madame. I only observe." Last among the gathered acquaintances was Dr. Felix Grant, a mild-looking man with spectacles too large for his narrow face. He stepped forward nervously. "I hardly knew Bernard socially," he said. "I was his physician." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "His physician? Ah, and how is his health?" "Fragile," Grant said. "Not perilously so, but he suffered episodes of anxiety and occasional fainting spells. I warned him to avoid emotional strain." "Did he confide anything unusual to you recently?" Dr. Grant hesitated, swallowing hard. "He mentioned receiving troubling correspondence. Anonymous letters, I believe. Bernard dismissed them as nonsense, but he did seem unsettled." Poirot exchanged a glance with Inspector Carlyle, who leaned forward. "Did he show you these letters?" "No," Grant said. "He kept them private." "And you, Docteur," Poirot continued, "where were you at the time of the murder?" "In the library, with several guests. I can name them if required." Poirot nodded. "That may be necessary." With the immediate interviews concluded, Poirot stepped back, surveying the four faces. The fear in Alexandra, the anxiety beneath Adrian's polish, the defensive rigidity in Vivian, and the trembling uncertainty of Dr. Grant. Each carried a secret. Each carried a motive yet to be revealed. And somewhere among them, or perhaps just outside their circle, lay the truth behind Sir Bernard's death. Poirot folded his arms, the faintest smile touching his lips. The little grey cells were stirring. The game had begun. Inspector Carlyle dismissed the last of the guests who had lingered near the doorway, and the atmosphere in the ornament room shifted subtly, becoming more intimate, more charged. Poirot's gaze travelled slowly around the scene once more, noting how shadows from the tall windows stretched across the polished floorboards, how the shattered ornaments' fragments glittered with faint menace. It was not merely the murder that interested him, it was the deliberate artistry behind it. A man strangled with ornament wire while standing among rare and delicate baubles suggested a symbolism, yet unspoken. He approached the toppled display case and crouched carefully. His fingers hovered just above a shard of the blue ornament. "You see, Inspector," he murmured, "the act of destruction here is almost theatrical, as though the murderer wished to draw attention to this specific piece." Carlyle frowned. "Or simply knocked it over in a struggle." Poirot straightened. "A struggle? No. Look at the body, mon ami. The limbs are bent, yes, but unnaturally arranged. Sir Bernard did not collapse. He was placed." Carlyle stiffened. "Placed? That's a bold assumption." "Not assumption," Poirot replied softly. "Observation. A man dying of strangulation does not fold his arm beneath him like a delicate scarf. He falls without elegance. But here, order. A peculiar, chilling order." Before Carlyle could respond, a servant cleared his throat from the doorway. "Lady Eugenia requests your presence in the drawing-room, gentlemen. She says matters have arisen that require urgent attention." Poirot nodded. "Then we waste no time." As they walked through the corridor, Poirot felt the tremor beneath the house's polished composure. Even the decorations, lace garlands, wreaths, gilded candles, seemed to flicker with unease. Harrington Hall, dressed for joy, now resembled a stage awaiting its next act of tragedy. When they entered the drawing-room, Lady Eugenia rose from a chaise, her fingers gripping a lace handkerchief. Alexandra stood near the mantel, clutching her arms, while a footman hovered uncertainly behind them. "Poirot," Lady Eugenia began, her voice strained, "I have just discovered something most distressing. I fear it may relate to Bernard's death." Poirot inclined his head. "Please, madame, tell us what troubles you." She gestured to the footman, who stepped forward, holding a small velvet pouch. Inside were several crumpled sheets of paper. Poirot accepted them delicately, smoothing the first page. The writing was uneven, ink blotted in places, the words filled with venomous urgency. "They began arriving 2 weeks ago," Lady Eugenia said quietly. "Addressed to Bernard. He asked me to keep them for him should anything happen." Carlyle snapped his attention toward her. "And you did not think to report this?" "They appeared harmless at first," she replied defensively. Paranoid ramblings. But Bernard grew increasingly agitated. He said someone knew something about an old mistake. Poirot read the first message. "You took what was not yours. Christmas approaches, and with it, so does reckoning." Another page bore the line, "The ornament remembers, even if you pretend to forget." And the last, "On the night of celebration, the truth will shine." Poirot folded the letters with great care. These speak with intention, not madness. Someone planned a confrontation, one tied to the symbolism of Christmas ornaments. The blue sphere. It was mentioned tonight, no? Alexandra stepped forward hesitantly. "Poirot. Bernard told me years ago that the ornament came from a village in Austria. He hinted that something unfortunate occurred during an acquisition, but he refused to give details." "And yet," Poirot said gently, "you believed it troubling enough to keep to yourself." A blush of guilt crept into her cheeks. "I did not think it mattered until now." Carlyle paced, rubbing his temples. "So we have anonymous letters, an old mistake, and mystery surrounding an ornament. But who among these people would care about Bernard's past dealings?" "Ah," Poirot said softly. "That is the question we must answer with great delicacy. For murder grows not merely from hatred, but from the soil of long-held grievances." A knock interrupted them. The butler entered again, flustered. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector, there is someone insisting on seeing you, a guest who left earlier but has returned." Carlyle frowned. "Who?" "A Mr. Lionel Hargreaves, sir." Alexandra gasped. "Lionel! He and Uncle Bernard debated antiques endlessly, but he returned. Why?" Poirot exchanged a meaningful glance with Carlyle. "Let us learn." In the foyer, Lionel Hargreaves, a thin man with intense blue eyes and a haphazard scarf, stood anxiously twisting his gloves. He stepped forward as soon as he saw them. "I apologize for intruding again, but I must speak with someone. This is important." Poirot motioned him to proceed. "It's about Bernard," Lionel said, lowering his voice. "We argued earlier this evening. It became heated." Carlyle's tone sharpened. "About what?" "A piece he acquired years ago. The same ornament I now hear was found broken beside him." Lionel swallowed. "I confronted him tonight. I told him he had cheated me. No, cheated others far worse. He dismissed it, as he always does." Poirot studied the man's trembling posture. "And what did he say?" "That I should let the past rest, that the ornament was nothing but glass and paint." Lionel's expression darkened. "But it was not. It represented a lie he profited from?" Carlyle stepped closer. "Where were you when he was killed?" "In the garden," Lionel said quickly. "I left after our argument. Needed air." "In the snow," Carlyle countered. "There are no footprints leading from the garden entrance." Lionel faltered. I do not know what to tell you. I went outside. Perhaps another door." Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. Monsieur Hargreaves, your distress is evident, but the truth, it will emerge. For now, you will remain available." Lionel nodded, defeated. As he left, Poirot turned toward the staircase, his eyes thoughtful. The threads of the mystery were tightening. Anonymous letters, a disputed ornament, old grievances resurfacing on a night meant for celebration, and now a man who returned to confess an argument at the very moment of murder. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. "There is an order to this chaos, a pattern, delicate as the filigree of a Christmas bauble, and when the final piece is placed, the picture will reveal itself." Carlyle huffed. And until then, Poirot allowed the faintest smile. We continue, mon ami. We observe, we listen, and above all, we think. The night was far from over. The tension from Lionel Hargreaves's abrupt confession still lingered in the foyer long after the man had retreated under Carlyle's stern instructions. Poirot remained still for a moment, his head tilted slightly, as though listening to something the others could not hear. Then, without a word, he walked slowly back toward the hallway leading to the ornament room. Carlyle followed, muttering under his breath about eccentric Belgian detectives, yet clearly unwilling to let Poirot out of his sight. The corridor felt colder than before, though no window stood open. Poirot paused near the base of the staircase, studying the carpet with quiet intensity. "You notice something?" Carlyle demanded. Poirot knelt, only that which wishes to be noticed. "See here, Inspector, the faint impression of moisture. Someone walked this way after being outside." Carlyle blinked. "You're suggesting Lionel told the truth?" "I suggest nothing," Poirot replied. "But facts are like small ornaments, each insignificant alone, yet together they adorn the truth." Alexandra appeared suddenly from the drawing-room, her face pale, but her voice steadier than before. "Monsieur Poirot, Aunt Eugenia asked whether you might examine Bernard's coat. It was in the cloakroom, and someone thought it odd that the inner pocket was torn." Poirot's eyes sharpened. Torn? Curious indeed. The cloakroom was quiet, its lamps glowing softly against rows of neatly arranged coats and shawls. A footman handed the garment to Poirot with solemn care. The coat, a heavy wool piece suitable for winter evenings, showed no sign of damage except along the inner lining, where the stitching had been ripped clean through. Poirot slipped a hand inside. "An object once resided here," he murmured. "Something flat, perhaps folded. Removed with haste." Carlyle folded his arms. "A letter?" "Maybe," Poirot said, "or documents tied to Bernard's mysterious old mistake. Let us not forget the anonymous warnings." Alexandra hesitated. "But who would take such papers?" "Someone who feared what they revealed," Poirot replied. "Or someone who wished to use them." He motioned toward a chair. "Mademoiselle, when Bernard spoke of the ornament's significance, did he confide in you at all beyond vague hints?" She shook her head. "Only that it came from a troubled transaction in Austria. He regretted it, I think, but he never said why." Poirot nodded gently. Regret is an emotion easily exploited. As Alexandra departed, Carlyle approached the window and stared out at the snowy grounds. "Poirot, if the murderer removed something from Bernard's coat, why leave the murder weapon behind? Why stage the body?" Poirot joined him. "Because the killer wished the scene to send a message, yet wished the motive to remain hidden. Dual intentions, Inspector, always the mark of a criminal who believes himself clever." A soft knock interrupted them. It was a maid, trembling slightly. "Monsieur Poirot, there is someone asking to speak privately with you. She says she has information, but fears being overheard." Poirot exchanged a glance with Carlyle. "Lead us." The maid brought them to a small music room near the back of the house. Inside, Vivian Ashcombe stood beside the piano, her fur wrap discarded, her face tense. She waited until the maid closed the door, then exhaled sharply. "I did not wish to speak earlier," she said, "because too many ears were listening, but Bernard's death, it changes things." Poirot stepped closer. "Madame, honesty now is not only wise, it is essential." Vivian clasped her hands. "Bernard visited me 3 days ago. He was distressed. He said someone was threatening him, demanding he confess to wrongdoing connected to that Austrian ornament. He claimed he had not acted alone." Carlyle frowned. "Meaning what, exactly?" Vivian's voice thinned. "He implied others from that era, people who traveled with him, might also be exposed. He would not name them, but he seemed terrified." Poirot watched her carefully. "And you, madame?" Why did this concern you? A flicker crossed her features, quickly suppressed. Because Bernard hinted the scandal might reach people connected to the charity I once managed. I feared reputational damage. Nothing more. Carlyle snorted. A convenient fear. Vivian stiffened. Believe what you wish, Inspector. But Bernard's anxiety was real. Someone wanted more than his confession. They wanted revenge. Poirot considered her words, then gave a small bow. Thank you, madame. You have helped more than you know. After she left, Carlyle turned to Poirot. Do you trust her? Trust is not the question, Poirot replied. Relevance is. Her information adds depth to the letters, the motive of shame, the threat of exposure. And Lionel, Carlyle asked. He believes Bernard cheated others. Poirot nodded. A different angle, yet converging on the same point. Bernard wronged someone, but who among them suffered enough to kill? They were returning toward the main hall when a sharp cry echoed from above. A moment later, the butler rushed down the staircase, breathless. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot, there has been another situation. Poirot felt the shift in the air, that subtle tightening that precedes revelation. What has happened? It is Mr. Hargreaves, the butler gasped. He has collapsed in the guest room. There is blood and a broken ornament beside him. Carlyle's face drained of color. Another ornament? The butler nodded. Yes, sir, a red one. Smashed. Poirot climbed the stairs with swift, precise steps. His mind raced. Not with confusion, but with clarity sharpening into pattern. Someone was escalating the game, accelerating it. A message had been sent with Bernard's death. Now another message awaited. As they neared the guest room, Poirot murmured, The murderer grows bolder, Inspector, or more desperate. Carlyle drew a breath. Do you think Hargreaves is dead? Poirot's eyes narrowed. We shall know in moments. But whatever awaits us, remember, this is no simple tale of greed. It is a tapestry woven long ago, now pulled thread by thread until the whole unravels. He pushed open the door. What they found inside drew a collective inhale from those gathered. For the mystery of the Christmas ornament, murders had taken a darker, more deliberate turn, and there would be no returning to ignorance now. The guest room held a strange stillness, as though the air itself were bracing for the weight of discovery. Lionel Hargreaves lay slumped beside the bed, one arm stretched awkwardly across the carpet, his breath shallow but present. A thin line of blood trickled from a cut at his hairline, staining the white fibers beneath him. Carlyle exhaled sharply. He's alive. Poirot kneeled with controlled precision, observing without touching. Beside Lionel's outstretched hand lay the fragments of a shattered red ornament, its glass scattered in a brutal constellation. A length of golden ornament string rested near his shoulder, taut and glimmering. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This was intended to mimic the first attack, he murmured. But look, there is no ligature mark upon the throat. No sign of strangulation. Carlyle crouched beside him. But the head wound? Inflicted. Yes, Poirot said, but clumsily. And see, Monsieur Hargreaves still clutches his gloves. A man surprised by an assailant does not retain such a firm grip. Carlyle blinked. You mean he staged this? No, Poirot replied. But the scene suggests movement, disorder. Someone attempted to attack him but was interrupted, or hesitated. Lionel stirred with a pained groan, his eyelids fluttering open. Confusion clouded his expression as he focused on Poirot's face. What happened? Carlyle answered bluntly. Someone tried to kill you, or frighten you. Lionel struggled to rise. Poirot placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Do not move too quickly, monsieur. Let the little grey cells awaken first. Lionel swallowed hard. I was in the room preparing to rest. I heard a noise behind me. When I turned, something struck me. I didn't see who. Male, female, tall, short, Carlyle pressed. Lionel winced. I cannot say. It was too fast. Poirot studied him intently, noting the tremor in his fingers and the darting of his gaze. Monsieur, he said gently, your return to the house was unexpected. Only those who knew you had come back could have planned such an attack so quickly. Lionel paled. Are you suggesting one of them followed me? Or one of them never took their eyes from you, Poirot replied. Dr. Felix Grant arrived moments later, summoned urgently by the butler. He knelt to examine Lionel, his clinical detachment firm but not unkind. A mild concussion. He'll need rest, but he is in no immediate danger. Poirot watched Lionel carefully. Doctor, earlier you spoke of anonymous letters Bernard received. Did he ever mention whether the writer threatened others as well? Dr. Grant adjusted his spectacles. Not directly, but Bernard feared that exposing his past would implicate more than himself. Implicate whom? Carlyle asked sharply. Grant opened his mouth, hesitated, then shut it again. He never said. Poirot did not miss the conflict flaring behind the physician's eyes. Grant was withholding something, not necessarily out of guilt, but out of fear. After ensuring Lionel could be moved safely, Poirot and Carlyle stepped into the corridor. The murmur of alarmed guests drifted from downstairs, growing louder with every passing minute. Poirot paused beside a sconce, his silhouette long and pensive. Inspector, do you not wonder at the choice of ornament? Carlyle frowned. What of it? The first was blue, Poirot said softly. The second, red. Colors of symbolism. Blue for memory, red for vengeance. If these choices are deliberate. You think the killer is sending a message through the ornaments themselves? A message, Poirot repeated. Or a story. One tied to Bernard's past, expressed through these objects he once valued. And now they are used to mark the unfolding of events. Carlyle rubbed his brow. But why two attacks? Why kill Bernard outright and only injure Hargreaves? That, Poirot said, is the question that reveals much. Lady Eugenia approached them quickly, distress etched across her features. Gentlemen, the guests are growing restless. Some demand to leave, others fear more violence. What must we do? No one leaves the house, Carlyle said firmly. Not until we determine who is responsible. Poirot offered her a reassuring incline of the head. Madame, fear is natural, but the danger is not as indiscriminate as it seems. The murderer is precise, targeted, and precision reveals purpose. She nodded, though unease lingered. Poirot. When Bernard gifted me that blue ornament earlier tonight, he said it was meant as a token of closure. Does that mean anything to you? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, a token of closure. That is very telling. Bernard wished to end something, but someone else wished to reopen it. They proceeded downstairs to the drawing room, where Alexandra paced restlessly. She hurried toward them. Is Lionel alive? I heard someone say, alive, Poirot assured her. But frightened. She exhaled shakily. Thank goodness. Poirot, I must tell you something else. Earlier in the evening, I saw Aunt Eugenia speaking in hushed tones with Dr. Grant. It looked intense. Lady Eugenia stiffened. Alexandra, you misunderstand. Bernard had asked Felix to bring him certain documents tonight. Medical notes. Medical notes? Carlyle repeated. Dr. Grant, who had followed them downstairs, winced slightly. Poirot turned to him. Doctor, I must insist on clarity. What were these notes? Grant fidgeted with the edge of his coat. They were records of Bernard's anxiety episodes. He believed they were connected to the letters. He wanted proof of his deterioration should anything happen. A means of explaining himself. Explaining, Poirot murmured. Or confessing. Carlyle crossed his arms. And where are these documents now? Grant swallowed. I delivered them to him personally. In the cloakroom. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Then those papers are what was torn from his inner pocket. They have vanished. Carlyle cursed under his breath. Meaning the murderer has them. Poirot looked toward the grand staircase, where shadows flickered like restless intentions. Not merely meaning so, Inspector. The murderer took them because they feared what Bernard intended to reveal. And now, his voice lowered, they may strike again. The house seemed to tighten around them, filled with secrets waiting to erupt, as Poirot's little grey cells continued their silent, precise dance toward the truth. The house had grown eerily quiet, as though Harrington Hall itself were holding its breath. The only sounds were the low murmurs from clustered guests in the distant hall and the crackle of the drawing-room fire, its glow casting long shadows that quivered across the walls. Poirot moved with measured steps, his gaze dissecting every corner as if the building's very architecture might whisper what its occupants concealed. Carlyle remained close, tense with the frustrated energy of a man accustomed to straightforward answers and now finding himself in a labyrinth. "We must locate those missing documents," Carlyle muttered. "Whoever has them has the clearest motive." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, Inspector. But also remember, documents alone do not kill. It is fear that gives birth to murder. Fear and guilt intertwined like threads of tinsel." They were nearing the eastern corridor when Alexandra hurried toward them again, her expression strained. "Monsieur Poirot, Aunt Eugenia insists you come to the library. She says there is something Bernard left behind, something she forgot to mention." Carlyle groaned softly. "Forgot? Everything tonight seems forgotten until convenient." But Poirot merely smiled. "Lead us, mademoiselle." The library was dim, lit only by a pair of brass lamps and the dying embers of a fire. Lady Eugenia stood near Bernard's favorite armchair, clutching a small wooden box. Her resolve wavered the moment they entered. "I should have given you this earlier," she said, lifting the lid with trembling fingers. "Bernard kept it here, hidden beneath his books." Inside lay a collection of small items, an old railway ticket, a faded photograph of a snow-covered Austrian village, and a torn parcel label bearing Bernard's handwriting. But what captured Poirot's attention was a folded slip of blue parchment tied with silver thread. He lifted it with delicate care. "May I?" Lady Eugenia nodded. Poirot unfolded the parchment. Ink, faded but legible, spelled out a brief inscription. Acquired 1908. Origin disputed. Payment made in confidence. Details withheld by request. At the bottom, Bernard's initials appeared alongside another set of initials. A.P. Carlyle frowned. "A.P.? Adrian Pierce?" Lady Eugenia stiffened. "Surely not. Adrian was a friend of Bernard's. They traveled together in their youth, yes, but—" Poirot raised a hand for silence. "This establishes only that Monsieur Pierce was involved in the acquisition of an ornament. A disputed acquisition. We must not leap to conclusions." But Carlyle's suspicion had already taken shape. "Pierce claimed he barely spoke with Bernard tonight. That alone is reason enough to press him harder." Poirot gave a soft sigh. "You see only the surface, Inspector. We must look beneath." Before more could be said, a loud clatter echoed from the hall, followed by hurried footsteps and a shout. Poirot and Carlyle rushed out to find Lord Adrian Pierce standing near a toppled pedestal, his face flushed with agitation. A servant held his arm as though preventing him from bolting. Carlyle strode toward him. "Pierce, what are you doing?" Adrian jerked his arm free. I was only looking for a place to breathe. Must I be interrogated at every turn?" Poirot observed the man's disheveled composure. His cufflinks were askew and a faint smear of dust streaked one sleeve. "Monsieur Pierce," Poirot said gently, "this is not the moment for indignation. A second attack has occurred. A life hangs uncertain. Your whereabouts during this incident must be clarified." Adrian's affect faltered. "I was in the conservatory. Alone. I needed space." Alone, Carlyle repeated coldly. Convenient. Poirot stepped forward. Monsieur, we discovered a document linking you to Bernard's acquisition of the Austrian ornament. Adrian's eyes widened. Just slightly, but enough for Poirot's sharp gaze to register. That was decades ago. A trivial matter. Trivial to you, Poirot said softly. Perhaps not to others. Adrian hesitated, his breath unsteady. Look, Bernard may have made mistakes. We all did then, but that has nothing to do with his death. Did he threaten to reveal what truly happened? Poirot asked. For a moment, Adrian said nothing. Then he exhaled. He hinted at it. Yes, but he would not have. Bernard valued reputation above all. If anything, he was tormented by his own conscience. Enough to receive anonymous letters, Poirot pressed. Adrian blinked. Letters? What letters? Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Carlyle. Adrian's surprise, if genuine, suggested he was not the only one connected to the Austrian affair. A footman appeared once more, interrupting them. His face was pale. Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Grant requests you immediately. Lionel Hargreaves has regained fuller consciousness. He says he remembers something. Poirot nodded. Then let us hear it at once. They returned upstairs to find Lionel sitting upright, a bandage wrapped around his brow. His eyes darted nervously to the corners of the room as though expecting shadows to leap forth. Poirot approached slowly. Monsieur, we are grateful you are stronger. You believe you recall something? Lionel swallowed hard. Not a face, not a voice, but a scent. Poirot leaned closer. A scent? Yes, Lionel whispered. When the attacker struck me, I smelled something, strong, unmistakable. Perfume, a floral scent, very distinct. Carlyle stiffened. Perfume? That narrows it. Perhaps, Poirot murmured. But do not be too eager, Inspector. Many ladies wear perfume. But the scent, Monsieur Hargreaves, describe it. Lionel closed his eyes. Sharp, almost bitter, like winter roses. Poirot's own eyes sharpened, a subtle spark igniting behind them. Merci, monsieur, he said softly. You have given us something most valuable. As they stepped back into the hall, Carlyle muttered, Winter roses. Who wears something like that? Poirot folded his hands behind him. A question, Inspector, that shall soon be answered, and when it is, the path to the murderer will grow clearer still. For the first time that night, Poirot felt the pattern tightening. The ornaments, the letters, the past, the perfume, all pieces of a design only he recognized. The next move, he knew, would come soon, and someone in Harrington Hall was running out of time. Poirot walked slowly down the corridor, his steps measured, his expression composed in that serene way that often hid the rapid calculations occurring behind his eyes. Carlyle followed with the barely contained impatience of a man who felt the truth was close, but maddeningly out of reach. Perfume, Carlyle muttered. Winter roses? That could mean Vivian. She wears something floral. Poirot shook his head gently. Do not assume too quickly, Inspector. Perfume lingers, yes, but it is also borrowed, traded, gifted, even imitated. A scent is a whisper, not a signature. They reached the landing overlooking the main hall. Below them, guests huddled in anxious groups, their voices hushed, the atmosphere heavy with dread. Poirot scanned their faces, noting constellations of fear, guilt, irritation, and worry. Human emotion was its own kind of ornamentation, and tonight it glimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Alexandra approached again, wringing her hands. Monsieur Poirot, may I speak with you privately? Her urgency carried none of the evasiveness he had detected earlier. He gestured toward a quieter alcove. Once there, she spoke in a trembling voice. I know the perfume Lionel described. Winter roses. It's not Vivian's. It's Aunt Eugenia's. Poirot studied her face carefully. "You are certain?" "Yes," Alexandra whispered. "She's worn it for years. It's distinct, sharp, almost metallic. You don't forget it." Carlyle's eyebrows rose sharply. "Lady Eugenia, attacking Lionel, that seems absurd." "Absurd, perhaps," Poirot murmured, "but nothing must be dismissed merely because it does not suit the imagination. We deal in truth, not comfort." Alexandra hesitated. "There's something else. Earlier, when you were speaking with Lionel, Aunt Eugenia seemed frightened. Not distressed, frightened, as though she recognized something." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "Merci, mademoiselle. Continue to observe quietly. Your insights are of great value." She gave a grateful nod and slipped away. Carlyle turned toward Poirot. "Surely you don't believe Eugenia Harrington is capable of attempted murder?" "Capable?" Poirot echoed softly. "Inspector, all people are capable. The question is motive and opportunity." Carlyle exhaled sharply. "Well, she had opportunity, but motive? Why kill Bernard? What could she possibly gain?" "Or avoid losing," Poirot murmured. Before Carlyle could respond, the butler hurried to them, looking both flustered and relieved to have found them. "Monsieur Poirot, Lady Eugenia requests your presence once more. She says there is something she wishes to set right." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "Ah, already she feels the weight of the net tightening." Carlyle frowned. "You think she is guilty?" "I think," Poirot said, beginning to walk, "that Lady Eugenia Harrington is a woman accustomed to control. When such a woman begins to fear loss of control, she makes mistakes." They entered the drawing room to find Lady Eugenia standing by the fireplace, her posture rigid, but her expression unsettled. Her hands, usually steady, twisted her lace handkerchief into a tight coil. "Poirot," she began, "there is something I must tell you. Something I concealed. Not out of malice, but out of shame." Poirot approached her gently. "Then speak, madame. Truth is the greatest ally in times of darkness." She inhaled shakily. "Years ago, during Bernard's travels, I was involved in the same acquisition, the Austrian deal. I financed a portion of it." Carlyle stiffened. "You? Why in the world didn't you mention this before?" "Because," she said, eyes flashing with a surge of emotion, "it was a scandalous venture, questionable legality. I wanted to keep my name clean. Bernard kept the documents, but I feared that if he revealed the truth, my reputation would be ruined." Carlyle leaned forward. "So you admit you had motive?" She paled. "Motive to silence him?" "No, never that. I only asked him to burn the papers. I never wished him harm." Poirot studied her carefully. "Madame, did you wear your perfume tonight?" She blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. "I always do." "And did you approach Lionel Hargreaves' room?" "Certainly not," she said, scandalized. "Why would I?" Poirot held her gaze. "Because someone wearing winter rose perfume was present during the attack." Her shock appeared genuine, yet Poirot noted the subtle tightening around her eyes, the unmistakable flicker of a lie formed, then reconsidered. She said nothing. Carlyle crossed his arms. "Lady Eugenia, where were you 15 minutes before Lionel was attacked?" She swallowed. "In my sitting room, alone." Carlyle exchanged a look with Poirot, a look filled with both possibility and growing concern. Poirot turned back to Lady Eugenia. "Madame, the truth must be whole, not selective." "I have told you the truth," she insisted, though her voice trembled. Poirot was not yet convinced. When they left her, Carlyle spoke quietly. "She's hiding something. But is it murder?" "We cannot yet say," Poirot replied. "Her fear may come from guilt, but not necessarily guilt of killing. Shame is a powerful motivator." As they stepped back into the main hall, Vivian Ashcombe approached, her usual composure rattled. "Poirot," she said urgently, "I need to speak with you." Carlyle groaned. Another confession? But Vivian shook her head. Not a confession, a warning. I believe someone has been listening to our conversations, someone moving through the house unnoticed. Poirot's interest sharpened. Explain, madame. Twice tonight, she whispered. I heard footsteps outside the tea room when I was alone. When I opened the door, no one was there, and just now, I saw someone slip around the corner near the servants' stairs. Who? Carlyle demanded. I couldn't see clearly, she replied, but it was not a servant. The posture was wrong, nervous, deliberate. Poirot nodded slowly. Then the murderer grows more restless. They listen because they fear the truth is closing in. Carlyle stiffened. Or they're preparing their next move. Poirot's eyes darkened with certainty. Yes, Inspector. And if we do not act quickly, that move will not be subtle. The hall seemed to pulse with hidden intent. Every shadow deepened with possibility. Poirot stood very still, the pieces arranging themselves in his mind. The killer, he whispered, is closer than we think, and tonight they have not yet finished their work. The hall felt as though it had shrunk, pressing its gilded walls closer with every passing second. Poirot remained motionless after Vivian's warning, his gaze distant, as though mapping unseen pathways through the mansion. Carlyle paced beside him, muttering oaths under his breath. The snow outside had thickened, muting all sound from the world beyond Harrington Hall, leaving only the murmurs of anxious guests and the relentless beat of tension pulsing through the air. Poirot finally spoke. Inspector, we must act as though the murderer listens still. They will reveal themselves not by what they say, but by what they fear we intend to discover. Carlyle scowled. How do you suggest we draw out a hidden killer? Poirot's eyes glimmered. By speaking of something we have no intention of doing. Before Carlyle could object, Poirot turned toward Vivienne. Madame, you must assist us. Your presence provokes reactions among the guests. Walk toward the servants' stairs again, slowly, with purpose. The murderer, if lurking, may attempt to anticipate your movements. Vivienne paled. You mean use me as bait? Only in the gentlest sense, Poirot assured her. We shall observe from a distance. Carlyle groaned. I hate this plan. Naturally, Inspector, Poirot replied, already moving. They positioned themselves at the far end of the corridor, partially concealed behind a tall tapestry depicting St. Nicholas presenting gifts. Vivian, trembling but resolute, began her slow walk toward the narrow door leading to the servants' staircase. The corridor seemed impossibly long, shadows pooling near the corners like watchful eyes. Poirot watched her feet, her posture, the sway of her wrap. Every detail mattered, and then, just before she reached the stairs, a faint shift broke the stillness. A whisper of movement behind a half-open door near the side hall. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Inspector, there. Carlyle moved first, charging forward with abrupt force. The door flew open, rattling against the wall, but the small study beyond was empty, save for a window slightly ajar. Carlyle cursed. Gone again. Whoever it is, fast. Poirot approached more slowly, his eyes traveling from the window latch to the thin dust on the floorboards. He knelt, touching the faint outline of a shoe print. A soft sole, he murmured. Not the polished shoe of Lord Pierce, not the delicate heel of the ladies, something practical, someone who wishes to move quietly. Vivienne shivered. A servant. Carlyle shook his head. The staff has been accounted for. Poirot rose, placing a hand thoughtfully against his chin. Not a servant, someone imitating one, someone who knows the servants' passages intimately, someone who has been in this house long enough to learn them. Vivienne frowned. But who? Poirot's gaze drifted down the corridor toward the grand hall where guests continued whispering in clusters. We must look not at those who flaunt their presence, but those who disappear too easily. Those whose comings and goings we accept without question. Carlyle stared at him. "You're being cryptic again." Poirot only smiled. "Patience, Inspector." They returned to the drawing room, where the crackling fire felt almost intrusive after the tense silence of the corridor. Alexandra looked up from a sofa, worry etched across her features. "Did you find anything?" Poirot bowed slightly. "We found enough to know we are not being paranoid." Before Alexandra could respond, Dr. Grant entered hurriedly. His spectacles were askew, and a sheen of perspiration glistened across his forehead. "Poirot, I must speak with you at once." Carlyle stiffened. "Another revelation?" "Not a revelation," Grant said breathlessly. "A loss." "What do you mean?" Poirot asked. Grant swallowed hard. "Lionel Hargreaves. He is gone." Carlyle exploded. "Gone? How could he be gone? He's concussed." "I stepped away only a moment to fetch additional bandages," Grant said miserably. "When I returned, the room was empty, the window open." Poirot's expression darkened. "The window?" "Again." He turned sharply to Carlyle. "Inspector, we must move quickly. The murderer does not wish Lionel to speak further." They rushed upstairs, the urgency of their footsteps echoing along the walls. The guest room was exactly as Grant described. The bed unmade, the window wide open, the cold wind sweeping in snowflakes that dissolved instantly upon the carpet. Carlyle leaned out into the frigid night. No footprints below. He didn't jump. "Of course not," Poirot murmured. "But the opening of a window is a gesture, a signal, a symbol." "Symbol of what?" Carlyle demanded. Poirot turned to the room, his eyes scanning every object with renewed intensity. Of escape, or of the illusion of escape. In the corner, a small glass ornament, green this time, sat deliberately placed atop a writing desk. Poirot approached it slowly. "Another ornament," he whispered. Carlyle's voice was low, but not broken. "Just so," Poirot said. "The first ornament shattered, the second shattered, but now intact." Carlyle frowned. "What does that mean?" Poirot touched the ornament carefully, as though it might vanish under his fingers. "It means, Inspector, the murderer no longer wishes to evoke violence. They wish to evoke disappearance." Carlyle stiffened. "You think the killer took Lionel?" "Oui." Poirot looked toward the staircase. "And they took him alive." The significance of that settled heavily over them. Carlyle wiped a hand over his face. "Why keep him alive? He's already spoken. He remembered the perfume." Poirot's voice grew soft. "Because he remembered more. He may not yet know it himself, but something in his memory threatens the murderer profoundly." A sudden crash below made them both turn sharply. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The killer grows reckless. Desperation leads to mistakes." Carlyle reached for the stair rail. "Then let's go catch them." But Poirot did not immediately follow. He paused, looking again at the green ornament. 3 ornaments, 3 meanings. Memory, vengeance, disappearance. A sequence, a message. Carlyle called from the stairs. "Poirot!" "Now." Poirot finally moved, his steps quick and purposeful. "Yes, Inspector. The time has come. The murderer has made their move. And now, Hercule Poirot shall make his." The hunt in Harrington Hall had entered its most dangerous stage. They descended the staircase with urgency, the murmur of alarm drawing Poirot and Carlyle toward the great hall, where guests had gathered in frightened clusters. A crystal vase lay shattered on the floor near the entrance to the ballroom, its fragments glittering like frozen tears beneath the chandeliers. A footman hovered nearby, pale and shaken. Carlyle strode forward, demanding an explanation, while Poirot observed the scene with the sharp stillness of a man listening for a note others could not hear. The footman bowed his head. "I heard footsteps, running, and then this fell from the table," he stammered, gesturing toward the broken vase. "But when I turned, no one was there." Carlyle clenched his jaw. The murderer is toying with us. Poirot shook his head lightly. No, Inspector. The murderer is revealing impatience. They strike objects now, not people. They grow unsettled. Lady Eugenia swept into the hall at that moment, Alexandra close behind her. The matriarch's composure had thinned, revealing a tremor beneath her elegance. "Poirot, what is happening? Are we in danger?" she demanded. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle yet unwavering. "Madame, danger comes only to those whom the murderer fears. That list narrows with each passing minute." Alexandra shivered. "Have you discovered who took Lionel?" Poirot folded his hands. "Not yet. But we know he did not leave willingly, and we know the killer chose a path unseen, a path known to few." "The servant's stairs," Carlyle muttered. "Just so," Poirot replied. Poirot turned toward Lady Eugenia. "Madame, apart from your staff, who else would know these hidden passages? Who has had reason to explore them?" Lady Eugenia hesitated, glancing toward Alexandra before answering. "Only family. Bernard knew them well. Alexandra, too, when she was a child." "And Lord Pierce?" Poirot asked softly. "Yes," she admitted. "Adrian stayed with us many summers. He would know the passages as well." Carlyle cursed under his breath. So any one of them could have moved unseen. Poirot raised a finger. "Not quite. For one must also consider motive strong enough to abduct Lionel alive." Vivienne approached them then, her expression troubled. "I heard him cry out earlier. Lionel, I mean, before he disappeared. A faint cry, but unmistakable." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A cry implies resistance. If the killer feared he might speak further, they would act swiftly. Alexandra stepped closer, her face tightening. "Monsieur Poirot, you said the ornaments were messages. What does a green one signify?" Poirot exhaled slowly. "Green is the color of concealment, of secrets buried, yet not forgotten." Carlyle shook his head. "I fail to see how color psychology helps us find Lionel." Poirot's expression softened with sympathy for the inspector's frustration. "Because, mon ami, the murderer announces each stage of their plan. Violence was stage 1, intimidation stage 2. Now comes disappearance. It is a pattern, one that will end only when the final piece is placed." A sudden scream ripped through the hall, sharp enough to freeze every conversation. Poirot spun, Carlyle right beside him. Guests scrambled back as a figure stumbled from the side corridor. Lord Adrian Pierce, his face ashen, one hand pressed to his chest. He's in the cellar," Adrian gasped. "Lionel, he's there. I heard him." Carlyle grabbed him by the shoulders. "How do you know that? Did you see him?" Adrian shook his head wildly. "No, the servant's stairs. I heard someone calling out. It sounded like Lionel. I swear it." Poirot stepped forward, eyes narrowing with a keen, almost surgical precision. "Monsieur Pierce, why were you near the servant's stairs at all?" Adrian faltered, the color draining from his face. Because the murderer—" Poirot raised a hand. "Enough. The truth comes, even when we are not ready." Carlyle turned to his men. "Search the cellar. Now. Move." As officers charged toward the cellar door, Poirot remained still, his eyes fixed on Lord Adrian with chilling calm. "You heard Lionel, but not by chance. Someone led you there, or you led yourself, because you knew something we do not." Adrian trembled violently, his breath coming fast. "Poirot, you must believe me, I'm trying to help." "Then prepare yourself, monsieur. For what lies beneath Harrington Hall will not remain hidden much longer." The cellar door creaked open with a heavy groan, the sound echoing through the hall like the awakening of something ancient. Officers descended with lanterns, their footsteps thudding against stone. Poirot and Carlyle followed, Alexandra clinging to the railing despite Carlyle's attempts to usher her back upstairs. The air grew colder as they descended, thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten years. At the foot of the stairs, a narrow corridor branched into darkness. An officer called out, his voice trembling, "Inspector, over here!" Poirot quickened his pace, his polished shoes tapping softly against the stone floor. They rounded the corner to find a small alcove where crates had been pushed aside, revealing a concealed space, and there, crumpled on the ground, was Lionel Hargreaves, alive, bound and gagged, but staring wide-eyed in terror at something behind Poirot. Poirot turned slowly, every muscle taut. A shadow detached itself from deeper darkness, trembling, hesitant, yet unmistakably human. Carlyle raised his lantern, its light flaring across the cellar walls, and in that wavering glow the figure stepped fully into view, breath ragged, eyes wild with knowledge that the game was over now. The lantern's quivering light revealed the figure at last, Dr. Felix Grant, his spectacles askew, his breath ragged, and his hands trembling so violently that the shadows flickered across the cellar walls like frantic wings. Carlyle stepped forward instantly, fury surging through him. "You!" he spat. "You brought us down here. Why? To finish the job?" Grant recoiled as if struck. "No, I never intended, Monsieur Poirot. Please, you must believe me." Poirot lifted a hand, stilling Carlyle with a quiet authority. His voice, when he spoke, caressed the air like a scalpel sliding across silk. "Doctor, why are you here?" Grant swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing in the lantern light. "Because I heard Lionel calling. I thought the murderer had returned to silence him. I followed the sound, but I became lost in the dark. When I saw you arrive, I panicked. I didn't know how it would look." Carlyle scoffed. "It looks like guilt." Grant's voice broke. "No. Please, no. I did not harm Bernard. I did not harm Lionel. I swear it." Poirot took a step closer, his expression unreadable. "Monsieur Grant, Lionel has just been freed from captivity. He is frightened, but not disoriented. And his eyes, when they lifted to see the figure emerging from the shadows, held terror, not confusion." Carlyle seized on it instantly. "Meaning he recognized you." Grant's breath hitched. No, that's not. Lionel, tell them. You know me." But Lionel, still bound and gagged, could only shake uncontrollably. Poirot crouched beside him, removing the gag with care. Lionel's lips trembled as he spoke. "I didn't see his face. Only the perfume. Winter roses. And then someone shoved me down here in the dark." Grant stared, bewildered. "Perfume? I do not wear perfume." Poirot straightened, his eyes sharpening like knives. "Ah, at last. We arrive at clarity." Carlyle glowered. "Then who, Poirot? Eugenia?" Poirot's silence was not hesitation, it was calculation. He turned his face slowly toward the cellar stairs, where faint footsteps approached. Soft at first, like drifting ash, then more certain, descending one measured step at a time. All eyes turned as Lady Eugenia Harrington emerged into view, lantern light gilding her features in cold gold. Her expression was a mosaic of exhaustion and resolve. "What is happening?" she asked faintly. "Why have you all vanished into the cellar?" Carlyle inhaled sharply. "Lady Eugenia." But Poirot lifted a hand. "Madame, we must speak openly now. The time has come." She stiffened. "About what?" "About winter roses," Poirot said softly. Her face flickered, just for an instant, a breath caught where none was expected. Alexandra, standing behind her, gasped softly. "Aunt Eugenia?" Carlyle seized the opening. "You were seen near the servants' stairs. You admitted you wore the perfume. You knew the passages. You had motive to silence Bernard. Your reputation." Lady Eugenia drew herself up, pride bracing her like steel. I would never resort to violence to protect my name. Poirot smiled, a sad, gentle smile that felt like the turning of a final key. Madame, I agree. You did not kill Bernard. You are not capable of such chaos. Your mind, your nature, they despise disorder. Carlyle blinked. Then who? Poirot's gaze shifted to Alexandra. She froze, for one breath. 2. Her face remained still, but her eyes trembled. Poirot spoke softly, almost with pity. Mademoiselle Harrington, when Lionel described the perfume, you were quick, too quick, to name your aunt as the wearer. Alexandra's voice was a whisper scraped against stone. Because it is hers. Ah, Poirot murmured. And yet you have borrowed it many times, as young women do. You wear it when you wish to feel powerful. Tonight was such a night, was it not? Alexandra's lips parted in denial, but her body betrayed her, stepping backward instinctively. Carlyle advanced. Explain yourself. Poirot shook his head. No, Inspector. Let her speak. Alexandra's chest rose and fell rapidly, as though the truth struggled inside her like a trapped bird. Bernard, he was going to expose everything, she whispered. Not about Aunt Eugenia. About my father. Lady Eugenia gasped. Your father? He was involved in the Austrian theft, Alexandra said, choking on the words. Bernard had proof. He told me he planned to share it, with authorities, with collectors, with anyone who would listen. He said wrongdoing must be accounted for, no matter who committed it. Her voice cracked. He would have destroyed my father's name. Poirot's voice softened. And so you killed him to protect a man already dead. Alexandra's scream tore from her like a wound. His memory is not dead. I have spent years safeguarding it. I would not let Bernard smear him as a thief. Carlyle stepped forward, but Poirot raised a hand. Alexandra's confession tumbled out, raw and broken. The wire was mine. I took it from the ornaments. I waited until he was alone and demanded he return the documents. He refused. He said truth mattered more than comfort, more than family. Tears streaked down her cheeks. He made me do it. Poirot closed his eyes briefly, a gesture of profound sorrow. And Hargreaves? Carlyle demanded. He knew Bernard carried the documents, Alexandra whispered. If he told you, everything would unravel. I only meant to frighten him, not kill him. But then he remembered the perfume. She trembled violently. I had to silence him, and when that failed, I hid him. Lady Eugenia staggered, gripping the wall. Alexandra, my dear girl, what have you done? Alexandra's voice was barely human now. What I thought was right. What I thought would protect us. Poirot stepped aside as Carlyle moved in to restrain her, his expression tight with grim duty. It is over, Poirot said quietly. Alexandra collapsed into sobs as the lanterns flickered, casting her shadow across the cellar wall, a fragile silhouette of guilt and desperation. Lady Eugenia reached for her, but could not bring herself to touch her. Poirot turned away, his silhouette calm, mournful. The ornaments told the story, he murmured. Memory, vengeance, disappearance, and now, truth. The cellar seemed to exhale, the storm above rumbling like a distant judgment as the long-hidden secrets of Harrington Hall finally came into the light. When Alexandra was led from the cellar in trembling silence, the house seemed to sag under the weight of all that had been revealed. The storm outside raged on, rattling the tall windows of Harrington Hall as if nature itself wished to sweep away the remnants of the night's dark revelations. Poirot ascended the staircase slowly, his steps deliberate, his expression grave. The dreadful work was done, yet the human tragedy lingered like a stubborn shadow. Lady Eugenia followed behind him, each step more unsteady than the last. The grandeur of her home, once filled with the warmth of celebration, felt foreign to her now. She stopped near the balustrade, gripping it for support. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered. "Tell me, was all of this truly necessary? Must the world know the truth of my brother's past now? Must Alexandra pay such a terrible price?" Poirot turned toward her, his eyes softening. "Madame, the world already knew fragments." Bernard's conscience grew heavy. The letters he received, the summons of old guilt, these forces pushed the truth toward daylight long before this night. But murder accelerates truth, and in the most tragic of ways. She closed her eyes, the lines of her face etched with sorrow and helplessness. "I tried to do what was right," she murmured, "to preserve our standing, our dignity. If only I'd seen Alexandra's suffering sooner." Poirot inclined his head. "Love, madame, can blind even the wisest of us. You sought protection, not deceit. But Alexandra, she sought absolution for her father's memory. Her grief transmuted into fear, and fear into violence. It is the oldest transformation in human nature." Carlyle joined them then, carrying the burden of duty in his rigid posture. "We've secured everything. She will be taken to the yard at once. Lionel has been examined and is recovering well. No permanent harm." Lady Eugenia shuddered, though it was unclear whether in relief or devastation. Poirot's gaze drifted toward the grand Christmas tree still standing in the center of the hall, its ornaments glistening as though mocking the night's grim symbolism. The Fabergé snowflake caught the light, casting fractured glimmers across the polished floor. He walked toward it slowly, his hand brushing along the lower branches. "How curious, is it not," he said, "that even in the darkest matters of the heart, people choose symbols. Alexandra used the ornaments not merely as tools, but as metaphors, each one representing a step in the story she wished to control." Carlyle nodded reluctantly. "Blue for the past, red for revenge, green for concealment. She planned more than we realized." "Non, Inspector," Poirot corrected gently. "She improvised. Her heart beat too loudly for careful planning. It was desperation that guided her hands. And desperation, Inspector, makes a pattern appear only after the fact." He touched the gleaming snowflake. "Had she not attacked Lionel, we might never have noticed the progression at all." Carlyle sighed. "Still, she hid things well, if not for that blasted perfume." Poirot allowed himself a small, sad smile. A woman can disguise footprints, fingerprints, even her own presence, but she cannot disguise the essence of herself. Scents, Inspector, betray the truth of our habits. Lady Eugenia sank into a nearby chair, drained of all remaining strength. Vivian Ashcombe approached cautiously, her own expression a mix of sorrow and disbelief. "I never imagined, Alexandra, of all people." "No one imagines such things," Poirot said softly. "That is why murder hides best in the hearts of those who believe they act in righteousness." Vivian placed a steadying hand on Lady Eugenia's shoulder. Carlyle, satisfied that order was restoring itself, excused himself to coordinate the departure of officers and witnesses. The storm outside began to ease at last, leaving behind a quieter, gentler snow that settled across the lawn like a cleansing blanket. Poirot stood before the towering Christmas tree once more, absorbing the last flickers of candlelight and their dancing reflections across the ornaments. So much beauty, he thought, masking so much pain. He turned toward Lady Eugenia. "Madame," he said quietly, "grief can shape a life more powerfully than ambition ever could. Alexandra loved her father beyond reason. She saw Bernard's confession not as justice, but as destruction. Guilt is contagious, you see. It spreads from one heart to another when left unspoken." Lady Eugenia lifted her gaze, shimmering with tears. Will she suffer terribly for this?" Poirot sighed. "The law must do its work, but I believe the greatest punishment she will endure is within herself. Tonight her soul unraveled, and that, madame, no prison can equal." The boom of the great clock in the hall's corner resonated through the air. Midnight. Christmas Day had begun, though the joy of the season felt distant, unreachable. Poirot retrieved his coat from the butler, who handed it to him with silent appreciation. As he prepared to depart, Alexandra was escorted across the hall. She paused for a moment, her eyes meeting Poirot's. In them he saw not anger, but a hollow ache. The final quiet collapse of a mind exhausted by the weight of secrets. Poirot gave her a small bow, his gaze filled with compassion rather than condemnation. When he stepped out into the gentle snowfall, the air felt fresher, lighter. The storm had passed, both outside and within Harrington Hall. Carlyle caught up to him near the gate. "A hell of a Christmas, Poirot," he muttered. Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, mon ami, Christmas reveals many truths, some wrapped in joy, others in sorrow. Tonight we merely unwrap the truth that had long been waiting." Carlyle exhaled. "Still, I wish it had ended differently." Poirot looked up at the stars emerging between tattered clouds. "As do I, Inspector, but one cannot arrange human nature as neatly as ornaments on a tree. Sometimes, even the loveliest facade hides a cracked core." He buttoned his coat, gave a final nod to Carlyle, and stepped into the snowy street. Behind him, the lights of Harrington Hall flickered softly in the darkness, no longer beacons of festivity, but quiet guardians of a story that would echo long after Christmas had come and gone. And Hercule Poirot, ever composed, ever reflective, walked onward through the falling snow, leaving behind yet another mystery, solved and another reminder of the fragile, unpredictable depths of the human heart.